session. So I'll just proceed through the agenda. Apologies. We've had apology from Steve Aiken, Philip McGuigan and Jim Allister. Are members aware of any other apologies?
No, expect all members.
No. Philip has delegated his vote to Melissa under Temporary Standing Order 1156. Yeah? Okay, Melissa, thank you. Has notice been received from any other member to delegate authority to any other member of the committee?
No, they haven't, Chairperson. No.
Okay, thank you. All members are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests at each committee meeting as applicable. So if any members any declaration of interest to declare?
On pension.
Oh, okay, as a pensioner.
I think you may have got in under the wire anyhow. I don't think you're affected. Look at you.
Okay, so just the one
declaration of interest as a public sector pensioner,
okay.
Yeah.
Or potential public sector pensioner.
Teacher's pension.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. Okay, Chairperson's business then, 3.1. The Chairperson of the committee and I met informally with the Interim Department Secretary Colin Boyle and with Mark McLaughlin, the Deputy Director of Communications and Engagement, on Monday the 20th of September past. This was agreed previously by the committee. We discussed budget timescales and the committee's dissatisfaction with the provision of budget information. The department is to write again to the committee setting out the interaction between the spending review and the next draft budget and the budget planning which is being undertaken by departments for the next 3 financial years. It is understood that departments have been asked to consider cuts of 2%, 4% and 8% for years 1, 2 and 3. It is understood that the department has been tasked to consider alternative sources of funding to support increased research and development in Northern Ireland. We discussed fire safety building regulations and the committee's concern that legislation and appropriate measures be put in place rapidly in order to limit the risks to any householders affected. The department is considering options including possible provisions to permit the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to provide assistance to the department in respect of the limited number of properties affected. We discussed staff resourcing issues in the civil service, including the filling of the reported 4,500 vacancies and replacement arrangements for the HR Connect, Account NI and aspects of NI Direct, as well as the ongoing reviews of recruitment and performance management, etc. We discussed the work of the Procurement Board. The Department agreed to provide an oral briefing on related progress later in 2021. The Interim Permanent Secretary asked that there may be an arm's length body bill introduced before the end of the mandate. An RHI action plan may be signed off by the Executive shortly, and a competition to provide for his permanent replacement might commence after Halloween and conclude in the new year. Are members content to receive the additional briefing on the Procurement Board, etc., as indicated? Is this agreed? Okay. Draft minutes of proceedings of the 15th of September 21. The draft minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of the 15th of December 2021 are at page 7. Are members content that the draft minutes of the 15th of September 2021 are an accurate recorder of proceedings? Is this agreed? Okay. Thank you. Matters arising. There are no matters arising. Is this agreed? Okay. Okay. Supported legislation, FGM Protection Order. I refer members to the SL1, the Female Genital Mutilation Protection Orders, relevant third-party order, Northern Ireland 2021 at page 17 of your packs. The proposed rule will come into operation as soon as possible so that, where required, the Health and Social Care Trust can apply for a FGM protection order without requiring leave of the court. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure. Is the committee content that it has no objection to the related policy and that it is also content for the department to make the rule? Is this agreed?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Supported legislation then, business tenancies, forfeiture. Sorry, I shouldn't be reading that bit, I apologise. I refer members to SR 2021-255, the business tenancies coronavirus restriction or forfeiture relevant period, Northern Ireland number 3, Regulations 2021 at page 22 in your packs. Previous correspondence from the Minister is appended at page 26, indicating that the rule will extend the moratorium on the restriction of forfeiture continue until the 25th of March 2022. The SR will come into operation on the 29th of September 2021 in breach of the 21-day rule. If members are content? Content, yeah. Good morning, Matthew. How are you? That the Business Committee for Finance has considered the Statute Rule SR 2021-255, Business Tenancies, Coronavirus Restriction and Forfeiture, Relevant Period, Northern Ireland No. 3 Regulations 2021, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statute Rules, has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. I refer members to SR 2021-252, the Financial Assistance Aluminium Composite Material ACM Mediation Fund, Private Residential Properties over 18 metres, Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021 at page 32 of your packs. The Executive agreed on the 8th of July 2021 to set aside £1 million as a remediation fund for certain properties with aluminium composite materials, or ACMs, and to give consideration to further funding if required. The SR allows for the remediation fund to be established. The restrictions are as indicated in the Clerk's covering note. The statute rule is subject to negative resolution procedure, and it is to come into effect on the 6th of October 2021. Are members content?
Content.
Okay. That the Committee for Finance has considered the statute rule SR 2021-252, the Financial Assistance Aluminium Composite Material ACM Remediation Fund, Private Residential Properties over 18 metres, Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statute Rules, has no objection to the rule. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Members are also asked to note in your table packs items a letter from the Minister indicating that the Remediation Fund call for evidence has been launched and will close on the 31st of October 2021. Are members content to note? Is this agreed?
Note.
Okay. So members, we're now going to receive an oral briefing from RIAs regarding the public service pension reform. The committee will now receive this, and I want to welcome on Starleaf Michael Scholes.
He's there.
Is he there okay?
Yes. Michael,
Research Office. Michael, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can, surely.
And the following papers, members, are relevant to this agenda item, an Assembly research paper at page 42. So, Michael, if you want to make your opening statement, please, and then I'll invite members to ask questions afterwards.
Surely. Can I just check if you can hear me and see me okay, Chair?
Both he and see you. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael. That's fine.
Great. Okay, I'm aware that you have a very busy agenda, so and also, sorry, I should declare that I am a member of the Assembly pension scheme. So I'm going to give a brief summary of the paper and then take questions at the end, with your permission. The paper really aims to support the committee in its consideration of the public service pension, or PSP, reforms and the McCloud decision. Section 1 of the paper presents a brief overview of pensions and outlines the case for reform. Now, as we know, PSPs are occupational pension schemes that are part of the overall remuneration package for staff in the public sector. And PSP schemes can be funded or unfunded. The funded schemes, such as the local government scheme, use contributions from employees and employers to invest in a pool of assets. The returns from these assets then are used to pay the pensions whenever they fall due. However, the majority of PSP schemes in the UK are unfunded. They simply use the contributions from members and employers to pay the pensions. Now, over the last decade, there's been a significant increase in costs for unfunded schemes. Estimations by the government's Actuaries Department showed that the cost would rise to £79 billion by 2060 from an estimated £25 billion in 2010. And following the UK election in 2010, the coalition government announced a package of measures in the budget which promised to deliver savings. They included a review of PSPs by the Independent Public Service Pensions Commission, which became known as the Hutton Review. The Hutton Review reported that PSPs in their current form were not sustainable and recommended several reforms, including moving the normal pension age to the state pension age, replacing the existing final salary schemes with career average schemes, and introducing a cost control mechanism. And the UK government accepted the Hutton recommendations and began to negotiate with trade unions to reform the PSB. So section 2 of the paper gives a summary of these reforms. Now, the reform schemes that were based on career average contributions were introduced in 2015. However, the government agreed to allow members of pre-existing schemes or legacy schemes who were close to retirement to remain on those schemes rather than making them move to the new schemes. This became known as Transitional Protection, and provision for this transitional protection was offered in the Westminster Public Service Pensions Act 2013 and in the 2014 Public Service Pensions Northern Ireland Act. So the transitional arrangements were left to individual schemes. Some schemes offered full protection, which really gave eligible members that were within 10 years of the normal pension age on the 1st of April 2012 could stay on their existing scheme until they retired. Some schemes offered tapered transition, meaning those between 10 and 14 years from normal pension age could stay in their existing schemes for a period ranging from a couple of months to several years, again after 2015. Section 3 then looks at the cost control mechanism that was set up by the UK government. Section 12 of the 2013 UK Act and the 2014 Northern Ireland Act made provision for an employer cost cap to protect the taxpayer against changes in the scheme costs. The cost cap is the level or threshold at which costs could be measured against at the time of evaluation, and this was set for employers' contributions as a percentage of pensionable pay. It's also sometimes known as the target cost. So the employer cost cap is essentially a particular way of measuring the cost of the scheme at the time of a particular valuation. Then at the next valuation, the cost of the scheme is assessed against that target. If the assessed cost is within 2 percentage points of the target cap, then there's no action that's needed to be taken. However, if the cost is more than 2 percentage points above the target, this is then known as a ceiling breach, and action is taken to reduce members' benefits or to increase members' contributions to bring costs back in line with the target cap. Alternatively, if the employer's costs are 2 percentage points below the target, known as a floor breach, then the value of the members' benefits will be increased or members' contributions will be lowered. Put simply, if employers' costs are too high, then members' costs must be increased to address this. When members' costs are too low, then when employers' costs are too low, then members' costs must be lowered to achieve the right balance between the two. And the first valuation was in 2016, and it used data from pre-reform schemes in 2012. However, the provisional results from that valuation indicated a breach in the cost cap floor, and that, added to the complexities in light of the legal challenges, meant that the valuations were put on hold. And I'll come back to the 2016 valuations later on. So moving on then to section 4 of the paper, it discusses the legal challenges in relation to the transitional protection provisions. In 2018, following the judgement by the Court of Appeal, the transitional protection was found to be discriminatory against younger members of the judges and the firefighter schemes. The UK Government and the Northern Ireland Executive consulted on remedy proposals to address this unlawful age discrimination. All eligible members of PSP schemes were given a choice between legacy and the new scheme benefits in respect of any pensionable pay between the 1st of April 2015 and the 31st of March 2022. The key question in the consultation was when that choice would be made. And the consultation gave two different proposals. Firstly, there was an immediate choice exercise whereby the choice would be made by the scheme members as soon as possible. And secondly, a deferred choice underpin where members could make the choice at the point of retirement or when benefits became payable. The majority of respondents selected the deferred choice option, and as a consequence, the UK Government introduced the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill to place the policy objectives emerging from the consultations on a legislative basis. In Northern Ireland, the Department for Finance brought forward a legislative consent motion to extend the bill's provisions to Northern Ireland. Section 5 then of the paper presents the cost implications of the reforms and the remedy options to address the unlawful discrimination. As I mentioned earlier, the 2016 valuations are still to be worked out for all schemes. However, under Clause 80 of the bill, ceiling breaches above the employer cost cap will not be rectified for the 2016 valuations. This ensures that no benefit reductions for members can take place as a result of the conclusion of the 2016 valuation process. Clause 80 makes provision to amend Section 12 of the 2014 Northern Ireland Public Service Pensions Act in relation to the employer cost cap. However, the bill will not prevent rectification of any floor breaches that occur at the 2016 valuations, and any increase in members' benefits that are due will be honoured. More generally, then, another key cost implication is the impact of continued increased employee contributions from 2015 onwards. This is particularly relevant perhaps for low-paid employees who cannot simply afford to pay more towards the pensions. Also for younger employees who may be saving for a deposit for a house or have generally higher housing costs because of rent or mortgages. Accordingly, then, there's a potential risk of these groups opting out altogether of the PSP schemes. And finally, in Section 6 of the paper, I make some concluding remarks based on the research undertaken. So, Chair, that's my attempt to demystify some of these issues, and it's a brief summary of the paper, and I'm now happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, we'll bring in Jim Wells, if you don't mind, Jim. Your questions, please. Thank you, Michael, so far.
I should say that I'm chair of the pension trustees here at Stormont, and as a very long-standing MLA, a beneficiary from the final salary pension scheme. We're now probably at the point of no return as far as the legislative consent motion is concerned. But from your reading of it, does the Assembly have any discretion whatsoever, or must we blindly follow the LCM? And what have we decided not to?
Really, that's an extremely difficult question to answer, and it's possibly a question more for the employees. Of course, we have the ability. Pensions is a devolved matter. We have the ability, as you know, to go our own way, but the ramifications of that would have to be drawn out with Treasury and negotiations between DFP and Treasury, and the considerable costs would have to be negotiated going forward, which would probably ultimately mean that either employee costs or employers' costs, or effectively the taxpayer will have to pay. But this is all really up in the air until the 2016 valuations are taken into account, because they have to be done first, and then the remedy options have to be taken into account again, so they have to be done again, and then we have to see where we go. So really, that the answer to your question is I would pursue that perhaps with the officials and find out their answers, but yes, of course, we do have an option to go alone.
Now, the second important issue that's come out of the consultation is that those in receipt of a pension will be given the option at the point in which they're about to retire or take the pension, and that, of course, is not necessarily the same date. And whether to opt in for the final salary option, as it were. Now, how on earth can we extrapolate and work out where we're going to stand at that point? Because we have no idea how many people are going to opt for option 1 or 2. And is that not going to create a huge degree of uncertainty as far as the public sector finances are concerned?
Yes, I would certainly agree with that. Just the, I mean, are you referring to the immediate choice or
Deferred choice.
the deferred choice? Is that, Mr. Wells? Do I understand you correctly?
Yes. We have
Yes,
no
well,
idea
the,
what you have tens of thousands of public servants. You have no idea what decision they're going to make. It's going to be an individual decision.
Yes, that's very true indeed. Yes, I mean it is going to be extremely problematic for the government actuaries departments. So yes, I mean I have no real comment to say apart from to agree with you that it is going to be extremely challenging going forward.
So then, how do you budget for pension? As you say, a lot of these pensions are not funded. Now, the one that I'm involved in, the Assembly Pension Scheme, is funded. So we know exactly where we stand because it's our money. But a large amount of this has been paid directly out of Exchequer funds, or in our case, the block grant. So has anyone even tried to extrapolate an estimate of what's going to happen here in the years to come as people start to retire?
No, but I would imagine Treasury would be working on those figures, and individual schemes would be working on those figures and projections. Because if you think about back in 2010, there were extrapolations going forward to 2060, I think it was. It was certainly for a long period of time, and they made some estimations of the percentage of GDP that pensions were the UK GDP that pensions really cost, and that was an increasing figure. So I think the ability is there. It's just going to be a very complicated task because of McCloud and the remedy decisions, heaping a lot of complexity on top of an already difficult situation.
Okay.
You too, Jim.
That's right, yeah.
Any other member want to come in on any points? No? Okay, no. So, Michael, back to Jim's point, if the LCM isn't supported in the Assembly, obviously in the paper there's an option for the Minister to do whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that the bill gives there's been an agreement to basically make the to make the amends by that's been extended to 2023. So the clock is ticking. So in order for us to go down our own legislative route. Now, obviously, this is something that you can explore with the officials whenever they come in front of you. But it would be, I think, extremely challenging to get all of that bespoke Northern Ireland legislation done in time for this particular mandate.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
Pat, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Pat.
That's it now, I hope. Listen, thanks very much, and thanks very much, Michael. Look, it's just a quick one. It's just to come in. I know that I should have checked up on it and tried. The department had previously made reference to the cap. Is that mechanism is removed now because of the McCloud? I know Jim is fairly well up on it, and we have our meeting tomorrow, but that's as I'm reading. Is that correct?
No, the mechanism is still in place. It's just that the valuations on which the mechanism are based, that's the 2016 valuations. That's been paused at the minute because of the complications around the remedy and McCloud. But the cost mechanism, that 2 percentage points either way, that's still going to be in place, and that's really crucial to establishing costs going forward. So that will, I would imagine, that will remain in place for a long time. Because it's the major, if you like, policy lever that the Treasury has to, if you like, keep costs and control for the taxpayer.
All right, thanks.
Okay, that you, Pat, yeah?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Michael, I think that's all. We've nobody else indicating any other questions. I don't know whether you're glad to hear that or not.
Michael, can I just thank you for a very clear and succinct explanation of what is a very complicated situation. I've been following this, obviously, for months, and I thought your paper actually explained it in layman's terms, which is very, very difficult, given the fact it's so complex.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you.
Very much.
Thank you too, Michael. Yeah, I was just about to thank you in your paper, so Jim has beat me to it. So thank you, Michael. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
So, members, are there any actions we want to take forward at this stage from that briefing? Obviously, we're going to hear from the unions now and then follow up the department. Is there anything specific after hearing that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we've discussed this many times, and at the end of the day, I think we have no option here. We do have the power to go our own way, no question about it. We do have control over this. But all the evidence that's been stated by Michael and by departmental officials and the Minister is that we're stuck with following slavishly what is going to happen in the rest of the UK, and that will be to the detriment of some pensioners. But I just don't see a way around it. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be almost pressing a nuclear option to do something different.
But ultimately, no actions from that.
I think Chairperson Pat may have a comment there.
Pat, do you want to come in with a comment there?
Hold on, to get into the spot. That was it.
Go ahead, Pat.
Yes, hello, thanks very much. It's a significant, there's implications on that on all of the reforms, but I really think that we as a committee should be looking at the unlawful discrimination that sets out that and comes from all of that ruling. We do have to be considerate and helpful, and I know what Jim said, that was a good document we got there, and it sort of gave me a better of trying to understand it. So I think that we have to look at all of those injustices which is carried out in that, because a lot of people take it word when that was first given to them, regardless of the McCloud ruling on it or not. I still think that there is something there which just says is unlawful to me, and I don't want to go overboard on it, but if I look at what happened with the women's pension when it was cut, I mean, it's just maybe, I know that there's huge financial repercussions there through it, but I think we as a committee should be looking at, is there any of that unlawful in it? Does anyone agree with me on that, or are we beyond that stage?
Well, Pat and members, if you're content, we'll have this next briefing and then the briefing from the department, and then we'll return to this for a sort of a discussion afterwards. Pat, are you content with that? Happy? Yep. Okay. Okay, so the committee will now receive an oral briefing from the public sector unions on the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill. I want to welcome, and correct if I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm incorrect on any of these names, Alison Miller,
yes,
General Secretary, Northern Ireland Public Services Alliance, NIPSA for short. Yep. Desi Lowry.
Yes.
Okay, Union Representative, Royal College of Nursing.
Yes, that's correct.
And Nuala O'Donnell, Union Representative, Irish National Teachers organisation. Okay, and then the Fire Brigade Union representative was unable to attend members today's session. So the following papers are relevant to this agenda. Clerk's note at page 71, NIC ICTU paper from April 21 at page 76, correspondence from the Police Federation from April 21 at page 77, and then an NIC ICTU response to the Department of Finance consultation paper at page 78. This session is being recorded by Hansard, and my understanding is, Alison, you'll be retiring from NIPSA shortly.
yes.
This is what it says here, so I'm reading it out. Please accept the committee's thanks and best wishes for all your evidence in your future.
Okay, well, I might be back in front of the committee again because I'm keeping on the pensions for my sins for a little while anyway.
So you're not really retiring? Okay, so thank you. So I'd like to ask the witnesses, in whatever order you seem fit, to provide an opening statement, so up till 10-15 minutes in totality.
Okay.
And then we'll ask members for questions if you're happy enough. So whoever wants to kick off.
I'll maybe kick off, and then Desi and Nuala will come in. So first of all, I want to thank the committee on behalf of all of the public sector trade unions, and I think it's important that the committee realise is that myself, Nuala, Desi and Jim, if he was available, it's not just those four areas, it's all public sector. So sort of we have been tasked on behalf of all of the public sector trade unions, sort of as a subgroup, to take forward all of the McCloud issues and issues connected to McCloud. So it covers all of the trade unions, but certainly this covers a number of the Pacific trade unions, and we have obviously consulted them on issues that will come before the committee today. And as the committee knows, this is primarily driven by unlawful age discrimination, which is commonly known as the McCloud remedy. Maybe just to clarify a point, when we met with the committee earlier this year, we sort of had a question mark over the issue of the use of an LCM or whether it should be primary legislation. And at that time, we sort of reserved our position on that issue because we hadn't seen the bill, and the bill then wasn't published at Westminster until late in July. And while the trade unions collectively have no issue with an LCM, if it's because it's specifically the issue with the McCloud, we do have concerns that the bill, as it currently sits at Westminster, and I think has reached final stage, is not how we believe this issue should be addressed. And that, I don't think that will be a surprise to the committee. So it's not about an issue of principle on an LCM, it's an issue about how the remedy is proposed in the primary legislation. But ultimately, the Assembly is responsible for taking forward however the issue of the age discrimination element is addressed. And I think certainly that's the key issue for trade unions and how the remedy is to be proposed. I'll keep this fairly simple on behalf of trade unions. The government was found to be discriminatory on the grounds of age in relation to how it implemented the decisions. Therefore, if in any other employment context an employer was found to discriminate, whether it's in religion, age, or whatever element, is the employer pays. You know, so if an employer discriminates against an individual, then the employer normally or always foots the bill for that. Yet in this set of circumstances, the scheme members are being asked to pay really for the discrimination that was introduced by government, and by government I mean Westminster and the Assembly. So we believe it's ludicrous or absurd that the remedy, i.e. the cost of the discrimination, is proposed to come from scheme members. So that's a fairly simplistic element, but I think that demonstrates is that to ask now, because Liz Truss suspended the 2016 valuations and how they would be implemented, which for most schemes meant that scheme members would benefit by way of, and it wasn't all schemes, but it was the majority of schemes, by a better accrual rate, therefore delivering better benefits to scheme members. That was suspended by Liz Truss, and at that stage we knew some of the issues for some of the schemes, maybe not 100% of them, and therefore, but we do know, had the decision around the McCloud remedy been 3 or 4 months later, then the suspension of those 26 valuations and how they would be proposed to be implemented would have already been put forward, and therefore now members wouldn't be asked to pay the cost of the discrimination. I want to keep that fairly simple because I think that clearly demonstrates that while the bill as it's currently presented means that scheme members would pay for the discrimination against them by the government, and we just think that's absurd. The other thing that we raised previously is that, as you are aware, is that whatever the remedy is for this, is at the time when an individual retires, then they would be given the option to either whatever would be most beneficial on the face of it, the choice. But as we explained the last time to the committee, the choice may be on paper look like option A is best for the individual. However, depending on their own financial circumstances and all of the issues that surround that, we believe every member, when they come to the point of retirement and making those choices, should be given financial advice, and that should be paid for by government, because again, these issues only came about because of that element of discrimination, and I think that needs to be, it hasn't, as far as I'm aware, been agreed at Westminster level, but I think that's something that this committee and the Northern Ireland Assembly need to give consideration to. We do have, and I think Desi's going to address this in more detail, but as we understand it, and I stand to be corrected, because sometimes finding your way through all the Westminster stuff, is that if this is dealt with by an LCM and then there's sort of technical papers then that would come to Westminster, can we just clarify with you, as our understanding is that, that those wouldn't necessarily come through or wouldn't come through the committee because of this, if this was dealt with by an LCM. And while Desi will deal with it, because I think he has the transcript of it, but it's much more detailed. And we're very concerned that that detail then wouldn't be scrutinised by the Assembly or this committee in relation to which will be very technical papers, and whether that's on a general basis or on a scheme-by-scheme basis. And I think that's something, you know, that we have concerns with, because this is a complex, very complicated matter, and we want to ensure that things are dealt with appropriately. And we have a responsibility to our members across public sector schemes to ensure the outcome of this is it's not to their detriment. So I'll maybe hand over to Nuala and then to Desi, maybe to pick up some other issues.
Yeah, just in relation to the cost cap, what Alison was speaking about there in the valuation was because the cost cap floor was breached on the 2016 valuations. And while Alison has covered the issues in relation to that, there was during the summer a consultation document from Treasury in relation to changes to the cost cap. Now there would need to be a similar consultation to take place in Northern Ireland. We, however, all did respond to the Treasury consultation because we are very concerned that not only have the outcomes of the 2016 valuation, which were beneficial to employees, been used to cover the cost of the discrimination by the employer, but that they're now looking to change how the cost cap operates, which in our view would be detrimental to employees. So that's another aspect to this that we, while it's not within this bill, it is almost like a fallout from it, and it is something that we'll need to be keeping a watchful eye on. And as I said, we do need a Northern Ireland consultation in relation to that if it's going through Treasury as well. The other aspect to that as well is the outworkings of McCloud. There is an indication within the bill that the information that will be available as in the statements to members in relation to the two schemes, the legacy scheme and the care scheme, that there is an 18-month window for those. And our concern in relation to that is that members who should be able to make these choices will not have information to be able to make those choices. Now, we do take on board there is a lot of work that needs to be done here, and that's another issue that will need to be looked at, actually, as in for all the schemes, to ensure that they actually have the funds and the resources to actually do this. But the timescales, there are already people who have retired who are within this window of the 2015 to 2022, although 2022 hasn't happened yet, but within that window. And so they're going to have to, all their pensions are going to have to be dealt with. There's people who have died whose pensions fell within that window as well. So there's a lot here, but if we're delaying even from the 2022 for another potential 18 months, there are a lot more people that will fall within this scope. So there are a lot of issues arising from this bill as well, not just the sort of the concerns that Alison has highlighted. So I'll pass on to Desi, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for your invitation. The concerns that the general trade unions are looking at are generally, as we have followed the passage of this bill through, at the moment it's with the House of Lords, and there was a second reading in just earlier a few weeks ago. But one of the concerns we had was when Viscount Younger of Lecky, who proposed the second reading, he obviously made it very clear that that it is of extremely complex issues in dealing with pensions, and they really have to be tailored, some of this legislation, to the specific needs of whether it be the health and social care pensions, or whether it's armed forces, or whether it's teachers and so on. And we have our own specific legislation in Northern Ireland. But my understanding is, from reading what has gone on at Westminster, is that the honourable member who proposed the bill, the second reading, did indicate that there will be measures coming through Parliament as statutory instruments for further scrutiny, and also that he's given a pledge to deposit further policy statements at Westminster. Now, the issue that we have is, to what degree will the Northern Ireland Assembly, and particularly your committee, have sight of those policy statements, have sight of statutory instruments that will go through, because they will have to be replicated here in Northern Ireland, so that that level and degree of scrutiny for each and every public sector pension scheme is given a robust assessment. At the end of the day, pensions effectively are deferred wages that our members have paid into, albeit with contributions from the employer. So we want to see no specific detriment as this legislation is passing through. Now, I didn't hear your contribution from your policy advisor earlier. I tried to listen to some snippets outside, but I didn't get the full assessment of the paper that's in front of you. But one of the context issues is understanding the fuller context for pensions. So yes, whilst we are focused on McCloud, and I suppose there are issues for judicial, which is raising the pension age from 70 to 75. Our primary focus is on what's going on in the landscape on pensions in Northern Ireland at the minute. I know your policy advisor took you through the 2006 evaluations, which are not complete yet. There's also the issue over the cost control mechanism, which is still under review, and a technical part of the cost control mechanism, particularly the SCAPE discount rate. It's a very technical aspect that's still out to public consultation at the minute. And also, on top of that, we have the effect of the changes of the 2020 valuations, which should have been completed by this stage. So you have all that landscape out there, and you have this passage of the Westminster Bill, and obviously a legislative consent. So it's trying to understand the full impact. And I know that previous select committees in the House of Commons have said that we should stand still and evaluate what has happened with our previous schemes to get a full understanding. So I do hope that what my colleagues have said will be taken into account by your committee, because what we need is a very robust assessment of that legislation, and also the various adjuncts to that, such as if Treasury are empowered to make directions, what can they do that will impact on our pensions. So, albeit to say that, just put on record once again, that we do not believe our members should pay, across the UK, it's estimated like £17 billion for the cost of remedy. And as Alison quite rightly pointed out, if that was in any other jurisdiction where discrimination was found, the employees would not have to pay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alison, Nuala and Des. I appreciate your points. So I'll maybe kick off with a couple of questions in with a few members, and I suppose I want you maybe to sum up. I appreciate I've heard several different points. So if this LCM is not passed in the Assembly, or doesn't go through the Assembly, and the Minister may elect to bring his own legislation forward, and I know you've touched on several different points there. What's the main, to sum up, what's the main points you want, if you would want him to bring it to his legislation instead of the LCM?
Well, in relation to what given that it appears from Westminster that the legislation is going to be get royal assent, is that then an LCM would not be appropriate for all of the reasons we have outlined today, and then you would need to bring forward primary legislation. And I think there's a big vacuum here. I think the issue is that it's not about getting it done by a particular date, being the 31st of March 2022. It's about getting it done right. Because I think if, and you know, we are aware there's already been some legal action taken by GB trade unions around this issue. It would be regrettable if we were forced into a situation that we had to potentially take judicial review or other legal proceedings in order to halt this. That's not how we want to operate. I mean, there's been enough, I think, legal arguments around this and has been dragged out. So at this point in time, if the Westminster legislation gets royal assent, then I think the Assembly needs to take a step back and decide how they're going to pursue this, because ultimately I think the unions are going to be forced into a position of taking legal proceedings in order to halt the implementation of this. That doesn't do anybody any good. That exacerbates the situation. And it's clear that our position is that Treasury needs to pay for the discrimination that was implemented, not the scheme members, and that's our succinct point. Scheme members in many of the schemes were actually, as part of the 26 valuations, should actually have accrued better benefits over the last 3-year period. That hasn't happened, and at this point in time, if the legislation gets royal assent at Westminster level, then the Assembly needs to pause and decide how it's going to take this forward, because as sure as day follows night, I'm aware of legal proceedings already in the pipeline or already implemented in GB, and therefore the likelihood is that we're going to be into another legal wrangle, which will again, legal issues do not get resolved quickly, and this will add to the complications. And I appreciate that for expediency it would be nice to follow Westminster for these reasons, but not if scheme members across the UK are now going to be asked to pay the cost of the discrimination. It's just not tenable from trade unions and scheme members' point of view. I don't know whether my colleagues want to add anything.
Happy enough. Leslie, you happy enough for that?
Yes, yeah, content.
Okay, Maisha, please.
Yes, okay, Fáilte Rovalig and Shaw. It's all very welcome here this evening. Thanks very much for your presentation as well too. And it's in relation to more or less the same thing again to them, sort of coming back to, because I detect, if anything, maybe a lack of confidence in terms of how the government actually is going to deal with this whole issue. You expressed concern that there's that danger of the cost of remedying the unlawful discrimination, and that it will fall sort of on scheme members, even though the department themselves have given assurances that this will not be the case. But do you still have concerns on this issue? Do you really feel that it's going to be left with the members themselves?
Absolutely, it's going to, because through the scheme advisory boards, and now they haven't all reported, and these are interim valuations. But if I can give one example, in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, the draft valuation is sitting at 5.3, and the cost of McCloud remedy is 4.8%. So within that 5.3, the vast bulk of the additional cost is through the valuation and the cost of the McCloud. You know, it was only ever paused at Westminster level because of the fact that it was likely that scheme members, that must have been in the thought process that they needed to pause that because this was going to be of a benefit to scheme members, whereas now it will be a disbenefit, and the valuations that were going to be implemented at that time and the benefits of that have now been wiped out. So you know, and at this point in time, not all schemes have been given the draft valuations. I think maybe the teacher's scheme.
The teacher's scheme, it's 5.3% and it's 5.2%. So it's wiped out. It's just the benefits from the valuations are completely wiped out by the McCloud remedy.
I can also confirm in terms of the representations that SAB in HSC SAB made in the 2016 scheme, that the benefits that we had made proposals to the department as we requested, they were stayed, but when we got the re-evaluation following McCloud, those were completely would not be attainable. But we have not got the percentage as my other colleagues yet, but we have made a request through the collective consultation working group, which the Northern Ireland Civil Service chairs with public sector pensions on.
And just in addition, that you've also more or less implied that probably bespoke legislation by the Assembly would be your preferred option. But that given the time constraints at the present time, is it likely, and I sort of picked up from your comments as well too, that maybe the pressure will come on you to accept, let's say, the LCM from London, i.e. on the 31st of March, or are you saying, and that being the case, it still is much better to delay in every respect, so that even after that date that it could be pursued for our own legislation here in the north of Ireland?
I think basically in response to that is that where our concern lies, as Alison has outlined, is that members are being forced to pay for the discrimination, and that's what's within this bill. That's the main concern that we have within it. And if that can be addressed by slowing the process down here, then that is what we would like to see, because we don't want, as Alison has outlined, that for this to go ahead and then for legal proceedings to go against that, because that delays everything even further. And there is a very, very strong feeling among the trade unions that, and because we went through the process with the 2016 valuations, and certainly a lot of the scheme advisory boards, including teachers, we had all come to an agreement as to what the outcome of that would actually be and the benefit for members. And remember, this was following the 2015 bill. You know, this was the outworkings of this. So everybody was following that. This wasn't something that people were getting as a bonus for some other reason. So we were following that, and then it was paused because of a legal case being taken against the Treasury. So I think that's the issues that we actually have, and we want to try and ensure that this time round it is done properly and that we don't get into a never-ending spiral of legal cases.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Jim?
You raised a fascinating point there about the subordinate documents that arise as a result of an LCM. And we have dutifully passed LCMs here for many years, and no one, as far as I'm aware, has raised the point what does happen to the technical documents that then appear. It's a pity, actually. If I had known that, would have asked our research staff member who's obviously the font of all knowledge on these issues. So I think it's something worth just checking with the committee, worth checking what does happen to the plethora of technical documents that will undoubtedly arise. But do you accept that we, the generation, apart from Matthew perhaps and Keith, who are quite young, but apart from that, that we are very privileged as to be members of final salary pension schemes, that our generation, I'm assuming the delegation are all over 50, like myself, I'm well over 50, that our there's no writs flying, I can see, that our generation is incredibly fortunate in that we have access to very generous final salary schemes, which those coming behind us certainly won't avail of because it's absolutely unaffordable. So is it a bit rich of us, and I say us generally, inflicting huge debt on our children and our grandchildren to ensure that employees don't pay for McCloud? Is that fair?
I think in response to that the scheme has already changed, that people are in the career average scheme, and the fact that they would be given the choice of which scheme, and actually what the actuaries have demonstrated to us in relation to in the Scheme Advisory Board, certainly in the teachers one, is that potentially the outworkings of their pension in the career average scheme between 2015 and 2022 would be more beneficial than the final salary scheme. Now, I find it hard to get my head around that in some ways, but they gave examples of it. So I think that's already in place, and what we're actually talking about is that was all part of the 2015 bill, and we're now at the stage, or the Act, and now our order for Northern Ireland, sorry, but where we are now is that having gone through all of that and still being in it, we're still being asked to pay for this, when it wasn't, and I think it goes back to the point that Alison made, that the employer is responsible for the discrimination, not the employees who were discriminated against. I mean, it just seems incredible that that is the outcome. And it's certainly not anything that we expected when the cases were taken, the McCloud Sargent cases were taken, and the outworkings of them was that the employees would end up paying for the discrimination.
Yes, but I think we need to get it into context. There has been an estimate. We don't know. We can only we can only guess as to what the overall cost will be. But it suggested that it could cost £97 million to undo the discrimination in McCloud. But interestingly enough, in the figures we've got here for health and social care, that's only 2.1% of the total pensionable pay for the period 2019 to 2023, and again, of course, this is all extrapolated. So, is it not reasonable that those who will benefit from the McCloud decision make some form of contribution towards it? And secondly, and I suppose I should have asked this first, do you accept that we simply could not go on the way we were going? That Hutton indicated that if we didn't, public sector pensions would rise by £79 billion. So, I mean, do you accept that that just simply wasn't allowed to happen? It couldn't happen.
Chairman, I think we have to distinguish between what is a public sector pension when somebody retires at 65, 67, and possibly 68 in the future, under Hutton and some of the reforms vis-à-vis the occupational pensions, and this is an occupational pension. And the United Kingdom generally sits within the lowest quartile of European countries if you add together both their public sector pension contributions and the state pension. And if you look at some of the countries up in Scandinavia who are in the upper quartile, who obviously put in more investment to their public sector pensions. So in one sense, where you're making the point, it's probably in terms of Lord Hutton and the reforms that were done over 10 years ago, which recognised that people were, I suppose, living longer, and to pay for that, pension age had to rise. So women changed from 60 to 65, and the proposal obviously to move to 66. But this, in terms of occupational health and public pension schemes, the reality of the situation for us is that these effectively are deferred wages, which are put into by our members. They pay a contribution in health service according to what they earn, and they're looking at that money is invested and available to be paid back later down the line, and hopefully 40 years, that people will come out with a reasonable pension. But from healthcare, and particularly from a nursing point of view, given that our members are mostly female, this issue of having golden-plated pensions is very much a myth, where the average pensions hit around £7,000, unless because most of our members, for example, will go out on maternity leave and for periods of time or take career breaks. I'll not get into specific areas, but yes, it is a very challenging, and you as guardians of public sector investment in Northern Ireland obviously have to scrutinise that you're getting value for money, and we respect that you have a challenge function to undertake.
But your basic tenet is that the pension member should not pay, therefore it should be the state.
No, this is specific around McCloud payment. The discrimination effectively, in our view, should have been reasonably foreseen by HM Treasury during the 2015 pension reforms, and that didn't happen. It took a court to decide. So when that court made a judgment, the government are now saying, well, our members now have to pay for HM Treasury and the government decision, and that's just unreasonable in our view.
So you're saying the pension member shouldn't pay. That means the taxpayer has to pay. That's what you're saying. It can't be invented. The money has to come from somewhere. And what you're saying is that future generations who will be in a much less lucrative pension scheme than us should pay to ensure that we have a higher than expected pension level.
I think there's an issue in relation to that the outworkings of Hutton was actually the cost cap mechanism, which actually gave the valuations in the 2016 valuations, which showed a breach of the floor, and actually gave benefits then to members, and that is what's being wiped out by McCloud. And I think, you know, if you're asking about sort of the changes that were brought in, and as I said, you know, the increases in pension contributions, all of that was all put in place, and the outworkings of it was that the members had to get a benefit back from it. The only difference that has occurred here, so if that had been progressing, there wouldn't be an issue, because people were contributing to their pensions and were actually contributing according to Hutton, the way it was all set up, the 2015 order was a 2014 Act in GB, or the UK. And it was the outworkings of that actually were giving the benefits to the members. So had that scheme been allowed to work its way out, then benefits would have been given to members and there wouldn't be an issue. The issue has arisen because of the discrimination. And that's where we're saying that members should not have to pay that. That's any member in that scheme who was in the scheme between 2015 and 2022, which is young members as well, because anybody who started in and around that time will be part of that scheme too. And I think that's the crux of the issue here. And it's also, as I did mention, about the consultation that's taking place on the cost cap. So they're looking to change that now too, because it is demonstrating that the pension schemes are not in the deficit, or that members are not paying enough, as Hutton said, that they were and are. So I think, and they're now trying to change that to actually ensure that they pay more. And I think there's a load of issues there that need to be looked at and need to be scrutinised very carefully within that, so that we don't have a situation where public sector workers are actually getting less of a pension than they should, because that has an impact on the economy as well.
Thank you.
Jim, that's you. Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you both for your evidence, and all three of you for your evidence. It's much appreciated. Can I just ask on? So the bill is at the House of Lords now. The UK bill is at the House of Lords. The concern about the UK legislating is not about the principle of the UK legislating. It's about the principle of the cost being borne by pension funds. Yeah. So fundamentally, the upshot of you asking for the Assembly to legislate is you asking for the Assembly to, or the Executive to, bear the cost. Now, what is have you gone away and done any work on, because it is, as Jim has said, hard to know, impossible to know, because we don't know what decisions. I should say, by the way, Chair, have declared that I'm a member of the UK Civil Service Pension Scheme, for my sins. Has any estimate been done on what the additional cost would be if we were to legislate here? Because that will be the question we will be asked, and we'll have to answer if we're.
I think it's estimated maybe about 17 billion.
17 billion.
Isn't that right?
So, yeah, it's 17 billion across, Mr. O'Toole, across the UK.
Across the UK, yeah.
So that is not a Northern. No, we haven't been given a Northern Ireland figure, and I suppose that was one of the issues and questions whether your advisor had provided you with that information. Unfortunately, we were outside of the hall, and because of COVID restrictions, we couldn't get into the public gallery to listen to that part of the session. And we only heard small excerpts from the TV.
Okay.
Chair, if it's possible, just to come back. I mean, I think this is an issue that from our point of view, it doesn't matter what the cost is now. I anticipate as legislators that is something that would be of concern to the Finance Committee and to the Assembly. However, there would be nothing in our view that would prevent the Assembly and the Executive going to Treasury and seeking that additional money, whatever that might be, because of the discriminatory element of the pensions. And I'm quite sure that's something that would arise out of any potential legal proceedings. As I've said, we think there's been a large amount of money expended on legal cases around this issue. We want to get the issue resolved. We don't want to be in a position of having to lodge legal proceedings, but if that's the route that we have to take, then unfortunately, to protect our members, that's what we'll have to do. But my understanding is that's already in process because the UK unions and the legislation is slightly ahead. And therefore we are aware that that's already in process. So already there is legislation seeking to prevent the Westminster Bill proceeding, and therefore if legal proceedings were lodged in Northern Ireland.
The legal proceedings in London to prevent from GB unions or from unions?
Yeah.
From the likes of the PCS type?
The likes of all the civil service unions, my understanding is the likes of the FBU already have proceedings in place, because this is so fundamental to the benefits of public sector employees who were promised if you pay more for your pensions, this is what the outcome of that will be, and here we are. And that I think this was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime change. Yeah. This was guaranteed for 25 years. You'll have heard all of this, and here we were, 5 years later. That wasn't, those commitments were thrown in the bin. So we have no fundamental objection to the issue of an LCM on this issue to address McCloud. It's the method of so therefore that could only lead to the Assembly having to lay its own legislation and come up with a different method to remedy, which would not be that members pay.
So, just to go, I want to come on to that in a second. But the bit around the UK GB unions lodging legal action, just would you need to? Could you join that? Could Northern Ireland unions join that? If presuming. Or would it have to be here on the basis of, would you have to be getting, if the UK government is legislating and we're doing an LCM, does that have to be?
I think it has to be here. I think now we would need to check that, but I think it would need to be here because the legislation would be going through here, so that's where we would need to challenge it. That's my understanding now.
It would be obviously for the courts to decide whether they would stay the proceedings to await the outcome.
And what is your understanding, what's your understanding, what have the Department of Finance said to you in terms of presumably they've told you why their preference is to do an LCM?
Speed, really is.
It's speed.
Yeah.
It's just speed? Have they said anything
primarily speed, and obviously funding is part of that. But, the Assembly of its own volition and the Executive can say, for these specific reasons, we don't want to further disadvantage scheme members on an issue that was discriminatory, potential face legal proceedings, which brings with it its own costs, and therefore, on balance, the best way to proceed with this is to introduce our own legislation, which would, of course, of itself then lead to the Executive needing to seek additional funding from Treasury for their discrimination.
So do you think that have you, but that you haven't, that point hasn't been covered directly yet on the record to you by the Department of Finance. They haven't said to you, we're basically not going to do that, or we don't want to do that, because our view is that if the UK legislation goes through, we decide to do our own discrete legislation here, but then say we're going to petition the Treasury to cover the cost. They're going to say no chance. Or is that they haven't said that to you yet? But is that probably what they think? Or
well, I think the department's in after us, so I think
that will ask them that. You're right. Yes,
yes,
you're right.
I think
you're
that's,
right. That's definitely
for a matter for the department.
You're right. Just, I suppose, lastly, in terms of the timing thing you mentioned, Alison, it didn't have to be done from your perspective. It was better to get it right than get it sort of rushed through by the end of start of the next financial year, basically. Yep. Is there not, though, our pension holders, to the extent that, I mean, some of these people are not, many of them will have now be retired. Some of the people who are directly affected, as you said, one or two of them sadly passed away. Presumably that's not large numbers if they're not, they're not that old yet. Are the policyholders generally kind of supportive of leaving it to try and get the cost borne by government rather than by the employer? Or I'm asking quite a long-winded question, but do you know what I mean?
I think I know what you're saying, and I think if there's a possibility of the outcome being positive towards members not paying for the discrimination, then it is worth the delay. Because at the end of the day, the outcome of McCloud has to be implemented. So they're still going to get that choice at the end of the day, whenever that comes. And if the benefit to the greater number is because they would potentially, those who have, I mean, for the 2016 valuations, potentially some of those who are retiring would actually potentially benefit from the better accrual rates if that was not being used to offset McCloud. So there's a potential further benefit for those people, and I suppose, as Alison has said, we have to look at the best options for our members, and that's the way we're looking at it in that context.
Because this is so complicated and actuarial, when you drill down into it, can I just re-summarise from a kind of helicopter view to see if I've got this correct? And you made this point, Desi, that the broader UK government pension reforms, which have mostly been enacted in Northern Ireland since 2010, largely from the Cotton Review in 2011, have been to the disadvantage, broadly speaking, of newer policy members, of which I'm one, by the way, from an earlier part of my career. They have not been, that has not been the advantage whether you're a public servant, civil servant, either here or in Britain. The McCloud judgement pointed to one specific unlawful unfairness that was found to be unlawful, a bit of age discrimination, proposed a remedy at around about the same time, or a year or two before, the new valuation created a potential small but significant benefit to a cohort, to the same cohort of pensioners, and the issue is that the small potential benefit from the 2016 revaluation is going to be wiped out by the proposed remedy to McCloud. So effectively, they will be, though it looks like they are even, some people will be even Stevens when you even out McCloud and the proposed McCloud remedy in the 2016 judgment. In actual fact, you're saying, in the context of it being fairly bad, for these pension holders, they're losing out in the broader picture. So you're trying to protect.
Chairman, can I just add one point here? When under McCloud, the deferred choice underpin will give individuals pensioner at the end, when they retire, an opportunity to say, were they better in this scheme during this protected period, or are they better in this scheme? So they're going to have a financial choice to make. And the one thing we haven't touched on was who pays for the financial advice that millions across the UK are going to have to find a financial person who is authorised by the FS Financial Standards Authority to give independent advice. And I know that question's been asked during the course of the passage at the House of Lords in the second reading, but there's no response yet. But that might be one that you would want to put to the department officials, because, again, as we said, this remedy was unlawful discrimination, of which our members have suffered, shouldn't be suffering a detriment. So therefore, they will need independent financial advice when they come to retire about which choice is best for them. Now, we within trade unions, given the fiasco many, many years ago, do not give financial advice, and we're very clear about that. So independent financial advice will have to be sought for individuals who choose that. And so who pays for that is going to be a question for your departmental officials.
But that's not in the, is it in the law that they have to have a financial advisor, or it's just it's not it's just that it would be sensible
by choice. Yeah,
it would be a sensible thing.
I recommend it.
Okay, thank you. But that summary, the summary I gave was relatively accurate. It wasn't an attempt. It wasn't a leading question. It was just to re-summarise for my own benefit.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Pat.
Thank you. I had Lord Mahanga and Matthew have covered it, but just want to have the union representatives there. If this LCM is not passed by the Assembly, if I'm reading this right, what changes would the unions wish to see? Like, what would you like to see if it was brought in by the Minister himself in order to try and mitigate the discrimination, which I've no doubt was practised out against your members?
It goes back to the issue of is that a new remedy would need to be found that didn't ask members to pay for the discrimination. So that would be the amendment to the Westminster legislation, which really, when you read the Westminster legislation, it would need to be significantly revised legislation, because it all leads back to the fact that members would be asked to pay. So it would be new primary legislation, which would take a bit of time to put together.
Okay, that's it, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. No other members indicated. Any other questions? So Alison, Desi and Nuala, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All
Chair,
the best.
could I maybe just clarify a position around, I think certainly maybe clarify this position that we asked about the technical issues, if that could be forwarded to us. And could you just, so I'm clear about the timescale now, the committee has to write up its report within, is it 5 days from today?
The standing orders say it's 15 days, 15 working days within the memorandum being laid, but usually the department's kind of flexible with this. Some will will want to be sure that the committee's happy, so if it wants to take a little bit longer, that should be all right. But members can ask the department that when they come in
yeah,
next.
because it's just when the the bill is then likely to come in front of the Assembly, because obviously we would want to make some representations outside of the committee.
That will be for the Minister then to ask the Business Committee when to schedule it, so they'll wait probably until the committee reports, which might be in early October. And just, sorry, Chair, just to clarify, when you're talking about technical guidance, are you talking about the statutory rules associated with the bill? And you're asking whether they come to the Assembly or whether they come to the Westminster? Is that what you're saying?
Some of the technical guidance you referred to earlier happens at Westminster.
Yes.
It follows suit here, effectively. So if there's a technical guidance in Westminster, does that apply here?
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
Yep.
I think it's Standing Order 42A, but it's just, we're not clear.
If there's a change there, does that mean automatically?
Yeah, so it's just
after LCM.
You never get the opportunity as a committee to, consider that.
Ask the department.
We'll get clarity on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks again.
Okay,
thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's all right. The department lined up, so I think.
Do you need to bring them in?
Yep.
Give me a minute.
Yep. Thanks. Members, sorry, Chair, just unusually, because the unions didn't provide a paper, I didn't know what they were going to say. So I've taken the unusual step, and hope members don't mind, of emailing the department and saying, the union has said the following things, would you like to answer these when they come before us next? And I hope that's okay. I wouldn't ordinarily do that, but it's just, I didn't know what they were going to say until they appeared. So hopefully that'll make the briefing more useful, Chairperson. So members, normally after a briefing like that, we'll have a discussion on actions, but if we're content, we'll get the next briefing and then have a discussion, because obviously all three briefings are very similar. Are we content in doing that? Yeah? Okay. The committee now will receive an oral briefing from the Department on the Legislative Consent Memorandum, LCM, for the Public Services Pension and Judicial Offices Bill. I want to welcome on Starleaf, and I want I'm going with Blythened Smith. You maybe can, you can confirm the pronunciation. I apologise if that is wrong. So you can confirm that. Assistant Director of Public Services Pension, DOF, and Stephen Ball, Public Services Pension Policy and Legislation Branch. The following papers are relevant to this agenda item. A clerk's note at page 132, departmental correspondence at page 137, and the LCM memorandum at page 147, and a copy of a 2021 Public Service Pensions leaflet at page 165. This session is being recorded by Hansard, and officials, you're very welcome if you'd mind making an opening statement, and then we can come back with questions. You're on mute. You're mute, Blanid. Blanid. I've just been educated there, Blanid. Is that correct? Is that the right pronunciation? You're still on mute. Not us. It must be you. Blanid. Stephen, do you want to take her out of the spotlight and put her back in again? See if it does anything. Stephen, can you hear us? No. Blanid, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you, Chair.
Blanid, can you hear us okay?
No, you're still mute.
Still.
Blanid, do you want to try logging off and going back in again? That usually works. I hope you said yes.
You could have her volume down.
She might do. Easily done. No, we'll wait. Just wait till she comes back. I think it's Blanid's leading anyway. So, Blanid.
Always the letter before the H is silent.
Sometimes you never know.
See that now? If you look at the name now, you'll E-H, Blanid, Gallagher.
There you go.
Stephen, we'll just wait. We'll just wait a wee second.
Chair, if you wished, I could make the opening remark unless you're content for wait until Blanid rejoins.
We'll wait a wee moment, Stephen, if you don't mind, just to see if that's okay.
Sure.
Hello?
Yes. Blanid, do you hear me okay now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, and I apologise for the pronunciation there. I've just been educated in here, but anyway, every day's a learning day. So
that's okay.
Whoever wants to kick off, give us a bit of an opening statement, and then we'll come back with questions if that's okay.
Yeah, I will indeed. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome this opportunity to update the committee on the LCM for the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill. And I will endeavour to address some of the issues raised by trade union representatives during that previous session in this opening speech. The bill is designed to remedy the unlawful discrimination in public service schemes arising from the McCloud ruling. And on the 3rd of June, the Executive agreed in principle for an LCM to extend the provisions of the bill for devolved schemes here. The bill was introduced in the Lords on the 19th of July, and it's had second reading, and next stage will be committee possibly around the 11th of October. I think unions were concerned there that it was about to achieve royal assent. There's quite a few stages yet to go through. Royal assent, I don't think is expected until early 2022. Chair, I understand members are now well informed about McCloud and the issues behind this. So the judgement in 2018 ruled that the transitional measures incorporated in the introduction of the reform schemes in 2015, which allowed older scheme members to remain in their legacy arrangement, unlawfully discriminated against the younger members. And it is that discrimination that has been addressed in this bill. So it must be remedied, and legal advice confirms that identical transitional measures in our schemes must also be remedied. And if you're content, I'll give you a very brief overview of how the bill achieves this, and the rationale for the use of an LCM as the most pragmatic solution to ensure unlawful age discrimination is timelessly addressed for all our members of our public service schemes. And I'm also happy to take questions afterwards. The bill provides the legislative framework for each public service scheme to provide their members who have been affected by the discrimination by the scheme with a choice of their benefits for the remedy period of 2015 to 2022, and they can be calculated under the reformed scheme or the legacy scheme rules. This enables all members to have access to the best benefit package for them that's available for this remedy period. And Chair, this choice is important because it would have been a lot simpler if we just return all members to the legacy scheme for the remedy period. But however, not all members will be better off from having their benefits calculated in the old scheme rules, and many will in fact be more advantaged in the reformed scheme. However, this choice also introduces considerable complexity, as can be evidenced from the number of clauses in the bill. I think it's currently at 114. Whilst the details of the remedy are complex and diverse, thankfully for the purpose of administering it, the differences between schemes here and in GB are not. The devolved schemes are practically identical in provision to the equivalent schemes in Great Britain. And the proposed changes in the bill are designed to provide a comprehensive policy response to address the discrimination to the satisfaction of the courts across all similarly affected schemes. And it's not simply a matter of extending an externally developed Treasury solution to the devolved schemes here. The core policy response which this bill gives effect to has been developed over the past 2 years with collaborative engagement between the Department of Finance, Treasury, and with input from policy representatives for both the devolved and the GB schemes affected. And in this regard, while the Assembly could legislate separately on this matter, the nature of the technical changes that are required to address the legal challenges across identically constituted schemes means there would be practically no realistic scope or rationale to deviate from the core response, which is now being developed and is carried in the bill. So on the fair choice underpin, the rationale for this remedy solution which the bill delivers is clear, and it represents the overwhelming majority preference of those who responded to the Department of Finance consultation on the issue. And it removes the discrimination which has occurred while also providing clarity, control and choice based on the accurate, up-to-date information necessary to inform decision-making at the time of retirement. The bill provides the framework for the required changes. However, scheme-level regulations that are required to implement the changes, remove the discrimination, give choice to members for the remedy period will be scrutinised and made in their relevant Assembly process. So where the unions brought up there about SIs being looked at in Westminster, obviously SRs would be looked at by the committees and the Assembly. So I hope that addresses Mr. Lowry's concerns on that. Excuse me. As I've already noted, this is a complex exercise and will involve adjustments to benefit entitlements for affected members for the period 2015 to 2022. as well as related adjustments for contributions and tax amounts for that period, may have been over or underpaid. The guiding principle is that affected members will be compensated for any overpayment of contributions or tax for this period. To ensure fairness for all scheme members, including those who have already paid the appropriate amounts of scheme contributions or tax in the period in question, the bill sets out processes by which adjustments will also be required where underpayment of contributions or tax liability occurs for an extra pension entitlement due as a consequence of implementing the remedy and the choice made. Where both overpaid and underpaid contributions occur, interest will apply in line, and this will be set in directions by the Department of Finance following consultation with the Government Actuary. In the case of deceased members, overpaid and underpaid contributions may also arise where a beneficiary of the member elects to take higher remedy benefits available in the scheme. Again, this is intended to ensure fairness for all scheme members. However, the bill also provides scope for the individual schemes to reduce or completely waive any underpayment of contributions in scheme regulations where it deems this to be appropriate, example being where it would cause hardship. There will also be cases where other members have already retired and receive pension benefits in respect of the remedy period service, or will do so now and between now and the introduction of the regulations for retrospective changes, which are due to be made by October 2023. The Department will work with schemes to develop processes and guidance to best ensure these members can exercise an immediate choice at the earliest available opportunity concerning their revised entitlements where adjustments are required. So for future service, the Department's response to the consultation also set out its rationale to ensure equality of treatment for the future, so that after the remedy period in March 2022, from the 1st April, all active members will accrue their future service in the reform schemes only. The LCM ensures that all members of comparable schemes are treated equally in respect of the scheme design available to them after this discrimination has been addressed. It would be unfair and would perpetuate the unlawful discrimination if some members of public service schemes and not others continue to be in legacy schemes after April 2022, as this difference in treatment would still be attributable to an unjustified age-based criteria. Again, Chair, while the Assembly could legislate separately on this matter, no practical scope or rationale for a different outcome has been identified in the course of policy development and consultation. It is acknowledged that not all scheme members who originally received the transitional protections will favour this outcome, but it's an unavoidable implication of the court's ruling on McCloud. It's important to be clear, and I've made this point previously to the committee, that it is only the transitional protection element of the reform schemes which have been deemed to be discriminatory and which must be removed. The case for reform schemes, as approved by the Assembly in 2014, and which most members have already moved to, remains valid, and the schemes are appropriate for future service. As well as promoting fairness across scheme members, these changes legislated for by the Assembly were and still are necessary to ensure that schemes remain sustainable and fit for purpose for the future. The 2015 reforms were based on the recommendation of the Independent Public Service Pensions Commission in 2011. And the recommendation was that all active scheme members should move to new, more sustainable, equitable, career average revaluated earnings schemes with normal pension age linked to state pension age. The bill now completes the delivery of this recommendation with its prospective remedy. It will also effectively set the scheme model and funding envelope for the public service scheme design, which will be funded by the Treasury and by extension the taxpayer from April 2022. any alternative approach would deviate from that design or cost envelope by providing a more generous benefit package for any cohort or workforce would inevitably require additional funding outside of normal Treasury arrangements. Therefore, Chair, the conjoined policy approach across analogous schemes which the bill legislates for and the LCM delivers for devolved schemes accomplishes a number of important objectives. The LCM fully removes the unlawful discrimination to ensure affected members of the devolved schemes are treated fairly and to the same timescales as other members of similarly constituted schemes in Great Britain, and therefore not disadvantaged. The Assembly's legislative timetable is already extensive, as we know, and it's extremely unlikely that we would have an Assembly bill delivered in the current mandate. The provisions of the devolved schemes are broadly identical to those of the analogous schemes in Great Britain, and the targeted changes in the LCM will mitigate the risk for further legal challenge and avoid the risk of cost pressures for the block grant should an NIU remedy otherwise deviate from the required core policy response that is necessary to address the unlawful discrimination. And before I conclude, I'll just touch on the judicial arrangements. If I could get my spinning circle away. Right. There are additional provisions in the bill which affect judicial pensions and terms of judicial office. The devolved judicial scheme contains the same unlawful discrimination transitional protections as other schemes established under the Public Service Pensions Act 2014. However, it has a very small membership of only 56 registered members, and approximately 30 of which are affected by the age discrimination and in scope of the remedy. Since its introduction in 2015, the scheme already differs from other devolved schemes in that, due to concerns about value for money, efficiency, economy of scale, and data volatility, it does not complete its own actuarial valuation, but rather applies the outcome of the Ministry of Justice valuation for existing schemes in Great Britain. In order to determine appropriate contributions and cost controls for scheme members and employers. Governance and some administration functions for the scheme are also already linked with or shared with the Ministry of Justice scheme. Under the LCM, the devolved judicial scheme would be incorporated into a reformed judicial scheme established by the Ministry of Justice. The LCM will also deliver additional reforms for some judicial terms of office, including a higher mandatory retirement age of 75, rising from 70, provisions to regularise arrangements for sitting in retirement, including for fee-paid judges, provisions to ensure consistency in payment of allowances. And the Department of Justice has consulted separately on these changes, and the Committee for Justice has also been briefed, and I'm advised is content that they are made. So in summary, the Public Service Pension and Judicial Offices Bill will implement a remedy solution for unlawful discrimination, which has been developed in a conjoined policy response between the Department of Finance, the Treasury, and with extensive input from the devolved schemes. The changes are designed to address the complex requirements of the McCloud ruling and will require unlawful discrimination as it applies across the similarly constituted and effective public service schemes, both here and in the rest of the UK. The solution is required by the 1st of April 2022, and any delay or deviation from this required policy response to address the matter will risk continued disadvantage for scheme members affected by this discrimination. Consistency of outcome with other similarly constituted schemes is necessary to avoid scheme-responsible departments here remaining vulnerable to future protracted and costly legal challenge. In the context of the legal imperative to remove unlawful discrimination, an Assembly bill for this purpose could achieve no additional benefit for the public service scheme members here in the timescales available, and the LCM represents the most pragmatic solution to meet the full requirements of the court's ruling on unlawful discrimination. I'm happy to take questions. I do know you're very interested in knowing about Treasury meeting the costs of McCloud. The overarching requirement really from the McCloud ruling is remove the discrimination. So it aims to put people back in the position they would have been had the discrimination not occurred. And where they get the choice of benefits and return to the legacy scheme, it's seen as an employee cost in the valuation process. And that's where the McCloud difference in the 2016 valuations has come about. Is there any other questions?
Thank you very much. I'll maybe kick off. I just want a wee bit of clarity on that regarding the Treasury picking up the tab or the individual. In your paper, you referred to any breaches of the cost cap floor resulting in increased benefits via increased accrual rates or decreased employee rates will be honoured. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, that would mean, for a quick explanation of the cost cap, a cost amount is set for each scheme. It's different for each scheme with a 2% corridor. So when the 2016 valuations are carried out, if a scheme's costs fall above or below this corridor, there's an impact on scheme benefits or contribution rates for members. It's only the actual cost of the benefits that's taken into account here. You know, it's not other outside costs like the skip discount rate, which would affect employer costs. So the cost of the benefits to the scheme, once they fall outside, there is an impact. If there's a ceiling breach, it could end up increasing employee contributions or decreasing the accrual rate, their scheme benefits. And the bill actually waives any ceiling breaches out of the 2016 valuations. So there won't be any detrimental impact from the 2016 valuations on members, either in contributions or in scheme benefits. But where a scheme would breach the floor and fall 2% below the current cost cap figure, schemes would expect then, members would expect to either have an increase in benefits or a decrease in contributions. And that will be honoured should that occur in the 2016 valuations.
So just apologise, I missed part of that, apologise for that. So you're saying then that members, they will not have additional contributions to make? Will that be covered by Treasury?
Yeah, it's Treasury are covering that. There will be no, and they cover it in the bill that there will be no, they will be waived any ceiling breaches that would occur in schemes.
So I'll bring in Militia. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, Sfáilte role Bláthnaid. Agus buíochas bhainne de Ratchis as well. Thank you for your statement as well, Bláthnaid. Just on to check, just a comment that you'd made there. Not realistic for people to depart from the scheme as proposed. Are you suggesting that it isn't realistic, we'll say, for the likes of the unions and that, we'll say, to be pursuing their own scheme here in the north of Ireland if they're not happy with what it is that's proposed in Britain?
Well, there would be funding implications to do something differently in Northern Ireland. The cost envelope is set for the schemes and the fund arrangements are in place with Treasury. Should Northern Ireland do something different in this remedy, which would cost additional money, it would have to be funded for locally. They would not pay additional money just for Northern Ireland schemes when they're legislating to do it differently for the rest of the United Kingdom. That would then have a subsequent knock-on departmental budgets and public services.
And what do you feel would be the consequences for the pension scheme members if legislation to deal with this issue was not in place, we'll say, by the 1st of April?
If there was a delay and we didn't have the legislation through for the 1st of April 2022, the first impact would be the prospective remedy wouldn't be in place to move everybody into the new schemes. So it would increase the remedy period. We would have to start and do our own bill, and then obviously if it didn't get through in this mandate, which is highly unlikely, it would go into the next mandate. The complexity that would be involved then for any different arrangements that would be secured through primary legislation passage here in Northern Ireland, cost aside, the complexity of that, we're talking about adding years on to actually rectifying this discrimination. For every year then, you know, there would be more cost, but there's also further risk of legal challenge. Members would quite rightly want to have this sorted as soon as possible.
And just finally, Blanad, what discussion did the Department conduct, with trade unions, the trade union representatives on this issue?
Yeah, we have a collective consultation working group with all of the public sector trade unions, and we have engaged regularly with them right through from prior to the consultation, regular meetings. We had a meeting arranged this week or last week, which wasn't able to go about, but we have met them separately in an ad hoc meeting on their concerns about the employee cost of McCloud. It's because it's figured into the 2016 valuations, and trade union side made some good points there when they were describing what their expectations were out of the 2016 valuation. But what I would point out is the new schemes were introduced from 2015. The 2016 valuation, new schemes were only in place for a year, and there was this cost cap mechanism set with the 2% corridor, and it was only expected to be breached in the most extraordinary, outcomes, in circumstances. So it was quite a shock at the time whenever the indicative results came out showing a lot of significant floor breaches, and because it was the first time the system was tested, the government in Westminster had called for a review of the cost cap mechanism, and that review is actually ongoing. The consultation period has closed, but government's response to that hasn't issued yet. So the value to scheme members of the McCloud remedy that's accounted for in the valuation period, obviously the assumption is made that majority of members will go for the financially better option for them, which quite often would be the legacy scheme. So it is right, if that's what the scheme members are getting, it's a scheme member cost and it's accounted as such in the valuation process.
Thank you.
Well, just to come back to a point there, the unions was in prior to obviously this, and I think you were online. So just for clarity, are they right, or are you wrong? And I don't mean that with any disrespect. So who's paying for McCloud? Is the Treasury paying for it, or is the employee contributions? I'm not clear on that.
It's not as straightforward as that. McCloud is an employee cost. It has worked out because members' scheme benefits are increased if they choose to move from one scheme to another, right? So then you're taking in member costs into account in the valuation, and it increases then the member costs. But it works out at that possibly all these floor breaches may not materialise because the schemes will be more costly because people are taking legacy schemes benefits. So the actual cost for the Northern Ireland schemes, because it had been raised there and trade union side weren't actually so clear on it, it's 97 million per year across our public service scheme. So that's for each of the 7 years of the remedy period. But as I say, the cost cap mechanism wasn't working as anticipated.
Okay, Matthew, you want to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. The 97 million, you've had it confirmed that from the Treasury that 97 million would have to come out of the block grant and it wouldn't be, it in no way would be funded. Have you made an argument to them about why it should be funded, or is that just their position that if Northern Ireland decided to have its own bespoke legislation, the cost would have to be met out of the block grant?
Yeah, that has been Treasury's position, and also was in the introduction of the reforms in 2015. I think we were looking at a £350 million per year difference if we did something different. Excuse me. Apologies for that. Okay. At least it's not a pigeon.
Shame it's not a pigeon, that's quite...
Sorry, where was it? Yeah, Treasury made their position clear if we do something different, that it would have to be paid for. And in fact, in the 2015 reforms, when we did Tigger Bill, there was a slight difference made for the fire scheme, as in the retirement age could be set in regulations within parameters. But even that, any deviance at all, that had to be paid for by members. It had to be a cost neutral arrangement.
Okay. And on the question of timing, so one of the arguments is around the doing anything divergent or bespoke here is that it would just cause more delay and all that. Are you not anticipating a delay from legal action in any case? It sounds like unions both in Britain and probably here are going to attempt to judicially review this.
Yeah, I'm aware of a case where unions, the FBU had raised a case on the pausing of the cost cap, and that could then be brought around to being a query on the actual making it an employee cost, and unions here have made their position clear on that as well, is that they would support any union challenge on that. But that's a bit of a separate issue to this LCM, because it is about the valuation process and how the costs are attributed. The main focus of this is to remove the discrimination. You know, it's a court ruling where we have to actually address the age discrimination within the schemes, and that's where our time pressures are mainly focused on.
Okay. The court ruling, though, obviously doesn't say you had to do it in a particular way, but okay, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. And I have no other members indicated, so I'd like to thank Lieutenant and Stephen. Appreciate you coming along today and giving your presentation and your answering the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So we put Gemma and Pat back in. We'll just see where we are.
Okay, so members, anybody want to make any comments? I suppose we've heard the raised briefing, we've heard the unions, and we've heard obviously now the department. Anybody want to make a comment or where want to take this forward at this point? And obviously in respect to your views of the LCM.
Well, from each, much better by the LCM. I mean, I'm sure, as we've heard, if it goes up to the council, if it goes to us in the Assembly, or something happens within the legislation, you won't just be pushing this down for years. And there is a problem there where people feel that they have been discriminated against. So it's very risky. Do you not agree for us? I know I've got consultation in order to go for it, but it looks like the primary legislation will be coming from the LCM. Am I reading that right?
But are you saying, Pat, you're supporting the LCM to go to the Chamber, or what are you saying?
I'm saying no. I'm saying that as it comes from where it's been read at the minute at Westminster, that recommendation, if they bring that forward, I think it would be very unwise for us to go alone.
Yeah, so you're ultimately supporting the LCM. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, but I'm only saying this is in private, this conversation, isn't it?
No, it's not. We're still in public session.
No, we're still in public session.
Okay, well then, I wanted to, I just thought maybe we were in private there. My apologies to that, but it does look like, that you'll have to take on board what comes out of that, and we need to listen to it. But there is a chance that if we bring this into our Assembly, this could go on for years and years and years.
Yeah, so you're basically saying not to go primary legislation, go with the LCM. Am I reading you right? Okay.
Well, just to the Chair, like, I'm not of that same opinion, and frank about it, that in fact I have heard what it is that the unions are saying here, and that it'll be interesting to see just how it evolves, even in relation to the legislation in Westminster itself. And I think to make any other judgment at this current point in time would be to undermine.
To be fair to me.
Sorry, Pat.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm talking. That take any other position would be to undermine their position. And I think that they have expressed the view that in the event of that legislation in Westminster not meeting their needs, that they then in turn would pursue our own legislation here in the north of Ireland. And I think that the onus isn't on us pointing them in that direction one way or the other. That's their choice, and I would back them in making that choice as well too. Should they feel
Just you done 1 second, Pat. You done?
Yes,
Go ahead, Pat.
And look, it was a case of. We have a report. We can feed into that report and look and guide where we are as a committee. What I'm trying to say here to you is that there are consequences no matter what way we go. So I'm trying to get a formed opinion, and until we see what comes out of that, or where it's going with that primary legislation, and where we are after taking in all of this evidence, and all of us no doubt will make our own contributions into it, into the secretary there of the committee. That's as I'm reading it. But no matter what way we go in this, folks, there are consequences.
Peter, I think we'll get Pat, we'll get Peter to come in now with a wee bit of an update on timeline, where we at and where we sit from a timeline point of view, and then we'll give the members an indication what we need to do and by when we need to do it.
So, Chairperson, just to clarify, the Minister has put a memorandum into the Business Office asking for, indicating that he's going to lay a legislative consent motion. So the committee is now asked about now to comment on that. Now, we can probably come back to this next week, but the committee will have to give its views one way or another very shortly, because standing orders restrict the amount of time we have to think about this. So the committee will have to say one way or another whether it's in favour, whether it's opposed. There's a middle way. You could say that you could support the legislative consent motion. We could also, I guess, write to the committee in Westminster that's considering this legislation and saying, yes, we agree with it under duress, but we're concerned about the following things. You could also seek assurances from the department around there was some reference to financial advice. I'm not sure how doable that is, but you could seek assurances from the department and have a shopping list of those and see what the department comes back with. But to be clear, the way this works is the Minister has put this memorandum in the Business Office. He's asking the Assembly, actually the committee, what do you think about this legislative consent motion? Committee produces a report, Assembly will vote. So the committee, in order to inform the Assembly, will have to produce a report and say something soon.
You can just say the committee doesn't have to advise the Assembly to vote for it one way or the other. We just have to give them a version of what Ray has given us today.
You could do. I think it's a matter for members to decide how valuable that will be to the Assembly. If it may be they can't agree a position, it may be they divide, but it would be like similar to the committee stage of a bill, that the committee produces a report which will then be useful for the Assembly in making up its mind. They don't know the ins and outs of all this. Sorry.
So, Peter, does members need to come back between now and next Monday, Tuesday, whatever date, if we agree this, with their indication of where they're heading with this direction, and then that'll give you some formal words to produce a paper for next week, which would need to be agreed next week?
What I'll do, Chairperson, if the committee agrees, is we'll have a closed session next week when we can chat about this, and then I'll produce the report very shortly after that for the committee to agree. And it could be, just to be clear, I'm not trying to coerce members, it could be, as has been suggested, that the committee agrees that it can't agree. Or that it agrees that it will not set out a position. So you could do that, but it will be a matter for you to make a political judgment about that. And sorry.
Pat, go ahead, Pat.
Look, Chair, thanks very much. You've been very patient with it. Does this mean then, Peter, that the passage of this legislation will lead to no extra costs or contributions from pension scheme members?
I think what the department said, and if the committee agrees, I'll just write to the department and get them to put it in writing, but I think what they said was that there was revaluation. The revaluation, which had been paused, was going to give pension scheme members a benefit. So teachers, all teachers on that scheme were going to get some kind of benefit, but what has been decided to do is to take that benefit and use it to pay McCloud. And what the unions seem to be saying is that there will be no benefit for any other members. So some members, my age, perhaps the member's age, would be beneficiaries, whereas other members, perhaps Mr. O'Toole's age, would not be beneficiaries, but would end up, have already made those additional payments. So if I understood correctly, there are no additional payments in order to cover McCloud, but the payments that you've already made, that's going to be used to meet McCloud. But to make it more complicated, there's another valuation in the pipeline, and they don't know what that's going to be. So that could possibly lead to additional payments for scheme members, but that is not clear. It is not clear at this time.
Pat, did you want to come back in on that?
Just 1 second, Sharon, thanks. But I also heard that it doesn't matter what way we go within those schemes, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers.
I think, sorry, Chairman, not to take the unions to make their point for them, which they made very well, but their argument is this is not the scheme members' fault, this is Treasury's fault. Whatever benefit the scheme members were due to get from the revaluation, they should get that. Then Treasury should stump up for the discrimination that they're responsible for, was their argument. But the department's counter-argument is, no, this is an employee cost, employees have to pay for it. So
Peter, are you saying, and as the members content, that we write to the department to get clarity on all that?
Yes.
In black and white, and bring it next week and have a closed session after meeting, and then members can put their views for or against, whatever the case may be, and maybe come to an agreement, a disagreement, or no agreement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
If that makes sense.
That's agreed.
Yeah.
So we're happy enough for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so members, will move on to correspondence. There's a fair wee bit to run through, so if you're patient, I'll go through this as speedily but obviously as precise as we can. So members are asked to note the index of the 16 received item of correspondence from page 170. 12.2 is a former Northern Ireland Civil Service employee. Members are asked to note to consider at page 175 of your packs further correspondence from a former Northern Ireland Civil Service employee. The committee has no role in respect of the resolution of HR disputes. There are no related policy issues. Is the committee content to respond? Again, stating that regrettably the committee can be of no further assistance. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Delegation limits for departments. Members are asked to consider at page 181 correspondence from the Department of Finance notifying the committee that it intends to revise upward delegation limits for other departments. The current delegations includes gifts up to a collective value of 5,000 and an increase in delegated limits for external consultancy, IT and capital projects. I think is that going from 2 to 5 million from memory? Yeah. Some of these are significant sums. These changes are based on a recent review. Is the committee content to write to the department seeking sight of the report of the related review of expenditure approval and business case processes. Is this agreed?
Right.
Okay. Localised restrictions of sport LRSS payments. Members are asked to note at page 189 a response from the Department advising that all unpaid LRSS appeals have been heard and none are outstanding. However, the Department also advises that including the CBRSS offsets, there are a total of 1,911 LRSS applications on hold. Almost all of these appear to refer to overpayments or ineligible payments. Where evidence is available to demonstrate eligibility, the Department indicates that LRSS payments at the appropriate rate and period will be made to all those businesses who meet the eligibility criteria. The Interim Permanent Secretary appeared to indicate on Monday that there may be further issues with LRSS payments. Is the committee content to note? Is this agreed? Okay. 12.5 salary advisors cost. Salary cost, should I say? Members are asked to also note at page 203 a departmental response explaining the special advisor's salary cost increase from 2016 to 17 to 2020 to 21 owing to the collapse of the executive in 2016-17. Is the committee content to note? Is this agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. It would take a little longer if Jim Alistair is here to talk about it, but he's not.
I think he raised it, that's correct, yeah. Okay, 12.6, Committee for Justice, GP Indemnity Scheme. Members are asked to also note at page 210 a copy of correspondence from the Committee for Justice to the Minister of Finance for the potential for Barnett consequences to fund a GP Indemnity Scheme in Northern Ireland. Is the committee content to note? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, Climate Change Number 2 Bill, 12.7. Members are asked to consider at page 213 in your packs a departmental response reference to Climate Change Number 2 Bill, which identified considerable capital costs and staff commitments for the executive. The department advises that the budget setting process for 2022 to 23 to 24 to 25 is underway. Is the committee content to write to the department and ask that, as a standard practice, all departments make their 3-year budgets available to their committees in April of each year? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. 12.8 Fiscal Council MOUs. Members are asked to consider at page 215 correspondence from the Fiscal Council advising that other departments have indicated positively in respect of developing memorandums of understanding and advising against the committee becoming party to information sharing, as this may limit candour. Is the committee content to note? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
12.9 Fiscal Council spending.
Sorry, Chair, if I may go back to the Fiscal Council question. So can I just refresh? I don't know if the clerk's able. Had we had in the terms of reference, had we asked a specific question about whether we could have access to this, or was this just something that we were advised by Robert Choate and the Fiscal Council that would be?
Neither. This was not in our report. What we were made aware of is that the department and the Fiscal Council have developed an MOU.
Yeah.
Great, so
yes,
they should.
Yeah.
But what the committee asked then was to be given sight of all budget information exchange between the Fiscal Council and the department. That wasn't something that we asked for in our report.
Yeah.
And what Sir Robert is saying is that isn't a good idea. He's saying that the Fiscal Council and the department should be allowed to chat away, share information, and then the Fiscal Council produces his report, and then the committee gets involved. Is how it works in other jurisdictions.
Yes, and we had specifically asked that we want to see the sort of correspondence on an ongoing basis, or
that's what our recent letter said. You can see at page 217. So that's where that had come from.
So
So he's saying
relevant budget information, is that where relevant budget information is quite a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Bottom paragraph, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Information. If relevant budget information provided by departments was also shared, he's saying his definition of relevant budget information is presumably that this is just ongoing iterations of budget information from departments, and he thinks it would be, he's suggesting, I mean, I know that in the example of the OBR and the Treasury, they don't give the Treasury Select Committee, obviously the Treasury Select Committee does a different role than we do here, it's less statutory, but they don't get all the emails that go back and forth on a many times a day basis between the Treasury and the OBR. Are we talking about on the same? I'm just sorry to be pedantic. I'm just wondering if we're definitely talking about the same things here.
So I think what we're talking about is the spending review will come out at the end of October or so. Yeah. That goes to the department. The department will then start to draft its budget. Somewhere in that process, the department will share with the Fiscal Council, but won't share with us. And that's what the Fiscal Council is saying is no, stay out, committee. Wait until the budget is produced, then they'll come along and they'll debunk, analyse whatever what the department has produced, but they will not
just
share.
On Matthew's point, we actually asked for all the information to and fro at all times. Technically, is that what we asked for?
I think we asked for, it was quite, I think our wording was, information sharing arrangements, and we asked for the relevant budget information should be shared with the committee at the time. So the committee, not unreasonably, is always looking for more information to inform its understanding. And so we asked for a weigh-in via those MOUs between the Fiscal Council and the Department. Fiscal Council is saying, please don't, because it will limit candour and sharing between departments and the Fiscal Council, and we should look for other ways going directly to those departments ourselves.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to...
No problem, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, we're on to 12.9, Fiscal Council Spending Review. Members are asked to consider at page 219 of your packs correspondence from the Fiscal Council advising that the Fiscal Council won't produce a report on the spending review but will instead apparently report on the Executive's draft budget when it becomes available. Is the committee content to note? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. 12.10, Fiscal Council legislation. Members are asked to consider page 221, correspondence from the Minister advising that legislation will not be brought forward in this mandate in respect of an independent Fiscal Council for Northern Ireland, and the drafting of the bill will only be complete by April 22. Are there any actions which members wish to take forward at this time based on that correspondence?
I think, for me, Chair, first of all,
go ahead, sorry.
First of all, it's I think it's disappointing because I think we could have put this organisation on a. There's clearly a lot of legislation to be got through, and we're always sort of slightly concerned about institutional stability. But assuming that we run to spring next year, I think it would have been possible to have done a short bill on the Fiscal Council. Certainly, I think we were planning that. We had built some of that planning into our committee plans. So I think it's disappointing. I suppose I would suggest one question I would suggest that we ask of the Minister is in accepting his, if we accept his statement that it's not possible to put it on a statutory footing by the end of this mandate, it would be helpful to understand, because I don't really to understand exactly what he is, what specific plans are in place to ensure that it happens and that it's drafted and it doesn't completely fall by the wayside. He says his officials are drafting it by the end of April 2022. But anyway, I'm slightly concerned that I think it would be, and he also says there's a line that where there are opportunities to do things more quickly, officials will do so. And also, it just does seem slightly sort of not imputing anything, but the Fiscal Council legislation drafting stage complete by April 2022. If it's it seems like it could be done quicker. So I suppose my question would be: do we write and just ask to be kept informed about what what progress the department is making, and underline our interest in ensuring that this legislation is drafted.
It doesn't fall by the wayside.
And this is not just, this is not to distrust what we're being told, but just to say we have an ongoing interest in this. That would be my suggestion of membership.
Is members content with that? So basically, write to the Minister of the Department with Matthew's points there. We're content with that.
I note there just that they've actually commented that in the event of there being opportunities to bring it forward more quickly, they will do. Yeah.
So we're content, members, yes?
Content.
Pat, yes?
Others are, yeah.
Okay. And sorry, Jim is still there,
yeah, Jim's still there. Yep, so we're still good.
Okay. So that's agreed, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. 12.11, unique circumstances funding. Members are asked to consider page 226, I presume that is, a response from the Executive Office declining to provide information to the Committee on unique circumstances funding. Are members content to write to the Department and to Statute Committee chairpersons and ask them to write to the Department seeking sight of the detailed spending plans provided to the Northern Ireland Office? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. 12.12 Land Registry fees. Members are asked to consider a page 231 of your packs, ministerial correspondence, advising that changes to land registry fees, typically £100 to £500 in Northern Ireland, will not be made in their present mandate owing to uncertainty in the property market and the likelihood that land registration fee income surpluses will reduce owing to a variable housing market. And also University Economic Policy Centre report is appended at page 233. The decision seems to be at odds with undertakings given to the PAC. The Northern Ireland Audit Office had found that property LPS was making inappropriate surpluses and that fees should be reduced. It is indicated that a further review may be undertaken in the spring of 2022. Is the Committee content to write to the Department seeking clarification on the actual and projected surpluses rather than just the income from land registration fees? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
We welcomed if in a position to actually implement measures as a result of that excess as well too, because it was something that was highlighted in the PAC committee in particular.
Okay, thank you. That's just a comment, Militia, isn't it? There's no action. That's just a comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Monthly spending forecast 12.13. Members are asked to consider page 258 a response from the Department indicating that previous monthly forecast did not include a very substantial projected underspend, as this was a central funding matter, and that a new section has now been added to monthly reports to include central funding matters. Are members content to write to the Department seeking clarity on central funding matters and asking that the monthly figures show how much money is being held centrally, also seeking clarity as to why this matter was not raised during the budget number 1 bill debate in March of 2021. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. 12.14 monthly spending forecast and outturn for August. Members are asked to consider page 263 a monthly forecast and outturn for August. Are members content to share with the RAIS and with the relevant committees where underspends or overspends are identified? Is this agreed? Yep.
Yeah.
Disposal and retention schedule, item 12.15. Members are asked to note at page 283 a departmental response to the committee's queries regarding the disposal and retention schedules. The department states that the requirement for a three-yearly review appears to be met by the three-yearly revision of the schedule legislation, and that the intention and disposal schedules are constantly under review. Are members content to note? Agreed. Like I had brought that up, that was just a clarity of the 3-year thing.
Yeah, there was a good question.
12.16 Common Frameworks. Members are asked to also note at page 451 an update from the Assembly EU Manager on the development of common frameworks. A revised procurement framework is to be issued by the end of October 2021. Are members content to note?
Content.
Is this agreed?
Yep.
Okay. 12.17 Members, House of Lords Committee. Members are asked to also note at page 454 a copy of further correspondence from the House of Lords Subcommittee on the Protocol to Treasury, reference EU Regulation 414/2021, dealing with import/export information system. The committee has written to the Executive Office suggesting that new processes are required for Assembly involvement in the passage of EU regulations of this kind. Are members content to note? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Chairperson, also, I'm sorry for interrupting. Is it the committee also content to share this correspondence with DFM on EU regulations with the chairperson's liaison group? So the committee had recommended that there be new processes for EU regulations, so the Assembly would have sight of them and such like. So CLG, I think, is interested if members are content.
CLG.
Chairperson's liaison group
Chairperson's liaison
within the
group,
Assembly.
not the UK Department. And this is the House of Lords, the letter from the House of Lords Committee.
We wrote to FMDFM saying, pending that correspondence, and saying, by the way, there should be a process for these regulations, because no departments had commented on them.
Would they not be? Yeah, and I suppose, just as another common parenthesis, probably it would make more sense for the department, for the TO committee to be the clearinghouse for this, because they are doing your job very well, Clark. But it's an extra burden on you and this committee whenever it's actually the TO committee that has more responsibility for it. Okay, so we're agreed on forward that on the TOs or the
CLG.
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, CLG, apologies. Right, 12.18, composite request. Members are asked to consider the composite request at page 455. Is the committee content that the composite request is an accurate and complete record of the committee's information request? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
So now we're moving on, members, you'll be glad to hear, to forward work programme, and then any other business. So forward work programme is a draft programme there, page 464 in your packs. As agreed at last week's meeting, the clerk has revised the timings for the financial reporting bill, bringing the committee's considerations forward to before Halloween. Assembly research and the department will brief on the bill. No other oral evidence is planned. If members wish to propose other oral briefings, they are asked to indicate this soon. If members wish to propose amendments to this bill and want to secure committee support, it is requested that they do so on or before the meeting of the 13th of October 2021. Do members have any comments? And if not, is this approach agreed?
Agreed. Chair, just one brief question. So if we've got Colin Boyle in front of us next week.
Do.
So we've agreed that it says there that it's Department of Finance business plan is what we're talking about, but presumably we can range across when we haven't agreed with him. We won't ask him about other matters, civil service, HR, or.
The business plan covers a lot of things, and also, but we do have NICSHR coming on the 3rd of November specifically about that. But the business plan covers a lot of things.
Right, okay, that's fine. That's great.
So we're agreed with that approach on that one, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. The Fiscal Commission has advised that it can't attend on the 13th of October 21, but would like to brief the committee probably in December on its interim report. Is the committee content to amend the forward work programme accordingly? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
It would appear that the Fiscal Council won't brief on the spending review, but may produce a report on the Executive's budget and possibly brief on this in December/January. Is the committee content to amend the forward work programme accordingly? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
The Minister advised that the Fiscal Council bill, as we discussed earlier, will not be introduced in the current mandate, but officials advised that an arm's length body bill may be introduced. Thus, the forward work programme will have to be amended accordingly. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. The last day of the committee stage for the defamation bill is currently the 2nd of November 21. However, in order to allow time for stakeholders to answer the call for evidence and for oral evidence to be taken in November and December, it is suggested that the committee seeks an extension to the committee stage until February the 4th, which is a Friday, 2022, but endeavours to report sooner than this. It is also suggested that the committee writes to the sponsor of the bill accordingly. Is the committee content to consider all of this next week? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Chair, just to clarify, I know that we're running out of time here, but just we need a bit of time to get the stakeholders in to talk about defamation, but there will also be a lot of pressure on plenary by the time you get to the length of February and March. So I'm waiting for guidance, and hopefully I'll get that and come back next week and then put a motion before the committee if they're happy about extending the committee stage, and we'll see how far we can go. Sorry, Chair.
That's fine, thank you. So we're agreed to that defamation bill, yeah? Agreed?
Yeah.
Right, is the committee also content to share the defamation bill with the Examiner of Statutory Rules and seek her views on the delegated powers associated with the bill? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Right, can I just double check on what we're agreeing to extend the committee stage till when?
4th of February.
I haven't agreed that yet. We're going to talk about it next week.
Good, okay.
But I think that would be enough time to get all the stakeholders in just before Christmas, have a week or two to deliberate a bit, do formal and informal clause by clause, agree the report and get that out the door by Feb, which should just about allow enough time to get the bill to be finished.
So just for clarity, we're writing to the bill sponsor?
Not yet. I think if we do that next week, we'll just talk about it next week. I've emailed Mike so that to give him an idea of where we are so that he can make himself available.
And then last point on the forward work, are members content with the forward work programme as amended? Is this agreed?
Great.
Yeah. Okay, so we're down to any other business. Is there any other business, members, that you have or have not? Nope. Okay.
Can I recommend you for the chair next week again too?
I'll read it in now. Date, time and place of next meeting. The next meeting of the Committee for Finance will be on Wednesday the 29th of September 21 at 2 p.m. here and on Starleaf. Meeting is now adjourned.
Okay, grand, thank you.
Thanks.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound.